now, as you probably know, FERMA recently published a white paper entitled Ensuring the Transition, and this was about expressing the concerns of risk managers about a lack of risk transfer capacity to support the kind of transitions that we're talking about today to a low-carbon economy, and calling on the insurance industry to do more to support its clients during these transition periods. So we're going to now have, as I said, we're going to have risk managers and insurers and put them together and confront their point of view in order to address the key issues which are confronting companies through the transition and to discuss the options. So I'm now going to ask, and you're going to applaud, the insurers will go over there and listen for the moment, and then the risk managers will come up here, and they're all going to come on the stage together. So give them a big round of applause, because here they are, all of them, please. Right, so this is one of the advantages of the catwalk, is that we here have the risk managers. A big round of applause for the risk managers. And here we have the insurers. A big round of applause for the insurers. There we are. I will be... Please, don't worry, we saw each other last year anyway, so I'll be introducing you later, but for the moment I want you to listen to what the risk managers have to say, and I'll come back to you, we'll put you all together and you can react, okay? So, we're going to give you 3 minutes each. Very difficult, but let's see what you can do. First of all, I'll introduce you for your 3 minutes. Let's start with Susie Sommer-Biscard, your Senior Risk Manager at Coloplast. And you're going to tell us about the challenges you as a risk manager face regarding cybersecurity risks. So let's hear about that.
Thank you. Well, I think all of us risk managers are facing a very dynamic risk information environment at the moment with many information security threats that we have to deal with. And we work closely with our organization to build in resilience. But we're also facing challenges when we want to transfer some of this risk to our cyber insurances. And it's becoming more and more complex to do so. Especially we are seeing high requirements coming from insurers as to the underwriting process. They typically have extensive questions and questionnaires that you have to deal with, often posed with yes-no questions that if you were giving it a yes-no answer, you would be disrepresenting the risk. You would be jeopardizing not taking out the right of cyber insurance. And when we share all this information with insurers, we are also lacking that insurers share insights back with us. It would be great if they could share insights as to what is actually in that information, what is actually driving the risk, what is driving the exposure, what is driving the availability of a capacity, and eventually also, of course, the premium. So that is some of the challenges we are facing.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you're taking notes, gentlemen, because you can react to this afterwards. But you can give her a round of applause. There we are. Thank you. Right, let's move on to Mario Ramirez Ortuda. You are Risk and Assets Manager at Exelum, and you're going to tell us about the opportunities you as a risk manager take to support the sustainability agenda that we were talking about in the first half. So tell us.
Yes, our opportunities as risk managers are opportunities that are linked to the opportunities of our companies. They ask us to bring solutions in terms of how to deal with the new risks that we are working on, and also to how to transfer those. But our question, in my case, I work in the oil and gas industry. The question is, how fast is the transition going to happen? And in this sense, some insurers decide that the transition have done already. They decide not to insure in the next years or in the next months any oil and gas new greenfield project, for example. And for give you an example about this, and again, about the aviation industry, like last year, we are building a new greenfield project in Lima, in Peru, in an airport. And we know that the transition in terms of how to move planes in the future until probably 2050 is not going to be hydrogen prepared to move planes. The transition is going to be with biofuels, and biofuels needs to be stored in oil tanks and transported by pipelines. So if we don't receive the support from insurers in this type of things, probably the transition will take longer.
Okay, so a very concrete example there of something you're actually facing at the moment. Okay, and Laurence Hickman, nice to see you again. You're Vice President Risk Management of Electrolux Group, and you're going to talk about insurance partnerships. How do you see this collaboration working in the future, faced with all the transition issues that we're talking about?
Thank you. With the crisis that we have had, our management and the management of many risk managers ask to be more resilient. Of course, this is not new, I guess, for anybody. And that means that protection comes before insurance. So what that means concretely in companies, we are investing a lot in protection, controls in place, processes, even more than that. So a lot is invested. And if there is one place where we can start the collaboration is data sharing. So we mentioned last year, or you mentioned insurers last year, for instance, that data sharing is something that we need to work on. Now it needs to happen. And why is that? It's that because we are increasing our protections. That means that we don't have so much risk information or claims information. We are guessing more than anything else. And by having this information, we will know where to invest, how to invest, and how to protect. So this is really important. And we, of course, need to work on framework to ensure confidentiality, but the competition will still stay there because insurers have their own underwriting strategies, and they have also clients have their own way of protecting themselves. So I don't think that will be a problem with the competition. When it comes to insurance, the other part that we still need to do, we see risk as risk managers is that we soon will not be able to offer or to propose insurance as a protection of our assets because our top management, they don't believe in insurance anymore. We have had a few cases where we contract certainty, where we have exclusion, etc. So they ask us to find alternatives. And the question is really for insurers to understand what is the strategy. Do you want to leave complex industrial risks and go more to smaller risks? I heard also sometimes an insurer saying we will go from paying, reimbursing to protect and prevent. And of course, we need the prevention part. But the reimburse and the insurance, this is what makes you, this is your key differentiator regarding comparing to the brokers or comparing to other players. So we really need capacity.
Well, we wanted to highlight cyber, sustainability and partnership issues. I'm sure we're going to talk about them. No, it's a bit like a game show. We're going to bring you over and so forth. You can come on to what we've decided should be called purgatory because it's in between the two things. So on music, we're going to take you over to meet the insurers. And you can all applaud like in a game show, but it makes people in a good mood. So come with us, please. So, thank you very much. We're delighted to have our insurers who've been listening very intently to some of the concrete examples about the themes we're going to be talking about in this roundtable. Delighted to have with us Edgar Puls. You are Chairman of the Board of Management, HDI Global SE. Xavier Véry, your CEO of Asia and Europe at AXA XL. And Henning Hagen, you're member of the Board of Management and Chief Regions and Markets Officer, Allianz Global Corporate and Specialty SE. I shall get in trouble if I don't ask the insurers to get a big round of applause too. There we are. Thank you. Thank you. 3 minutes each. You heard what they have to say. Let's start with Edgar. Reaction?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for speaking out the topic so open. And let me start with you, Susie. You're talking about cyber. Hopefully, none of our companies sent you out a questionnaire with yes and no questions only. Hopefully, only do you want insurance, yes and no, but then the other question should be much more separated. Actually, I agree with what you said. It's a complex situation because I think what we are all facing together, and I don't want to separate between, risk managers in the company and insurers only, we are facing a permanently changing environment. And it's a rapidly changing environment. So actually, what in cyber and tech could have looked like yesterday, maybe next week it looks totally different. So I think a strong collaboration and also what you said, Lawrence, a constantly partnershiping in this, that is very crucial for us. Finally, I know the discussions about capacity. We all have to deal with accumulation risk. We all know that. Has there been a solution so far? No, there hasn't. So actually, we try to find solutions which fit to each and every company individually, but we are very much focusing on the risk prevention situation because finally, it's not about the status quo, but it's about the system, how you organize those risks. And once you have a system in place, then I think you have also the trust that you may react on those weekly changing attack situation. And hopefully we always found a solution and also capacity for you there. Then Mario, what you said, I like that a lot because we are always focusing in this transition, which is also part of the FERMA this year, the transition of what we don't want to do. Everyone is focusing on what we don't want to do, but we need a transition phase to get where we want to go, and how can we get there. And we all know that this transition phase and also the new technologies, there are a lot of new risks in. So I see that as our responsibility, not only as HDIs, but from all of us as insurers, to follow and to support this transition, because I guess no company can do that by themselves, right? So dealing with new risks, dealing with new technologies. We talk about hydrogen, transportation of energy, storing of energy. That should be our daily business, and definitely we should do that together. And we are very much focusing on this transition phase. And for example, we already started to insure wind farms onshore, offshore, something like 25 years ago, without having a real risk tracking, but slowly and step by step stepping into those situations. But that's what we need to do together. And that, Lawrence, brings me to the partnership, of course. It's not, I don't like this you and we. I think it's the us we have to do that. Yeah? And I couldn't agree more with what you said. We need an aligned interest, and we want to stay insurer. Of course, we want to also transfer more to the prevention phase, what we are doing since 100 years anyway, right? But we have new technologies in doing that. We are talking about big data. We invest a lot in industrial Internet of Things, in having a higher prevention level. But finally, we as an industry, we must be there when it comes to losses, to claims, and then, of course, it's our responsibility to pay what we agreed before. So partnership is very important to understand the needs and the necessities from within each other and with the entire industry, and then to continue going the path, especially what you said in the changing risk environment. And we are anyway in a very fast, rapidly changing world. So hopefully we prove that we will also continue doing that together.
Xavier.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for, Pius, for all those comments, and thank you for your remarks and comments. I would like perhaps to take one step back and to say, where are we now? Where do we stand? We have faced over the last few years unprecedented crises, and we are still facing unprecedented crises. We've seen a pandemic that has claimed more than 2 million lives in Europe. We are facing climate change. We are facing an inflation crisis. We will probably, most certainly, face an energy crisis over there. So clearly, and we've been talking about world is changing fast. And we need all of us to adjust. What struck me in your introductions is that you all talked about data, sharing, transparency, and partnership. And I think that regardless the line of business we are talking about, whether it's cyber, whether it's renewable, whether it's DNO or whatever it is, so ultimately, what is clear is that tomorrow's risks are very different from the risks that we are having yesterday and that we are currently insuring. If we look at cyber, we estimate that it's a $5 trillion loss for companies in 2021. It might reach $10 trillion by 2026. It's massive. It's industrialization of crime. We definitely need to tackle that. And we cannot tackle that just by an industry. We have to tackle it together. The insured, the people which are exposed to it, the governments, and the insurance company and the insurance industry. We all need to work collectively on those topics. Same goes for renewable and the transition, the energy transition. Energy transition will not happen overnight, and you are right, Mario. We need to change from a punitive stance to basically a supporting stance. We've been, at AXA, one of the very first to have a clear policy about not investing anymore in carbon emission companies and things like that. But we also realize that it's not sufficient. We need now to move to work with our clients to identify the energy transition, to identify the champions in the energy transition so we can support that transition and help it happen. Because rightly said, and you said it, Pius, you said it as well, if we are not here as an industry, this transition will not take place. So overall, we've talked about data, and Laurent, thank you very much for basically almost quoting AXA Excel or AXA motto from payer to partner. This is what we definitely believe in. We believe that we need to be more embedded together in the discussions about prevention, about risk management, about incident management. That's specifically true for cyber, but tomorrow it will be equally true for renewables, and it's true for all the lines of business that we are having, to help our customers project themselves in the future, to help us better manage with you your risk and cover them. That's why we are investing quite significantly in an organization like AXA Climate, for instance, which is here to help predict what's going to happen in terms of the impact of climate change in the infrastructures, in the area that needs to be covered, and so on. But this is also why we are investing a lot in technology, in data sharing, in data collection first, data analyzing, and then ultimately data sharing. So I think we'll talk probably more specifically about some of those topics later on, but clearly, if there has not been any better time to talk about insurance in transition, which is a theme of our FERMA, but moreover to talk about how can we collectively find the solutions for tomorrow's risk, which are more systemic, which are more, I would say, global, that's a point of systemic risk, and for which we need to find and define collective answers which were not required in the past, but which will be, in fact, the core of the value proposition for the future.
Okay, I'm going to let you react, but I want to hear Henning first, and I've got a few questions based on what you've been saying. But Henning, how did you react, first of all, to what you heard when they were over on the other side of the stage?
Yeah, thank you very much, and pleasure to be here. And couldn't agree more with what we said. It's the first time we are really aligned. I think that's very good. But thank you for being that open as well. I think this theme of transitioning together says it all. You mentioned through three main core topics we are all interested in as risk managers, but as carriers as well, and reinsurers who might be here as well, because these are the pressing areas. I think you mentioned it quite rightly. I think the main theme we are seeing globally is that we are seeing a change in the environment from a macroeconomic perspective, impacting us and exposing us as an industry, whether as a buyer or as a carrier, which we probably have not seen before in that very compressed period of time. So you mentioned the COVID situation, the inflation we are seeing, the invasion of Russia in Ukraine having impacts on all sorts of exposures we are seeing. We have got the global warming, the weather changes, and all pretty much compressed in a short period of time, and we need answers for that. And I think that's we are all here together to discuss this, and I think that's great. From a cyber perspective, I think I don't want to repeat what colleagues said, but I think we all know obviously that cyber is a precious capacity, and we all know as well that there's not a lot of this capacity around, and we also know that as carriers and as industry, we really haven't found the answer yet which is the biggest topic we need to face, which is the aggregation. Yeah, so we obviously know as well as like, hey, that there's a lot of or a high increase in terms of ransomware attacks, and the whole industry is like, hey, has a need for this cyber insurance. But on the other hand, we know as well as like, hey, there is this potential that there is a correlation and that these exposures are aggregating. So that means, on the other hand, we as a carrier, we are asked to for the relationship to be a reliant partner as well in the long run, and really making sure that we are here for the long run. That means as well, we need to understand the risks. We need to make sure it's like, hey, that we can absorb them, and that we basically promise as well, or that we stick to our promise and then pay out in a claim situation as well. That means we need to understand the risks, and a lot of these risks we heard about are new risks, and we can't really use the backwards mirror and really have to have different tools to look into the future and understand the risks, and then really understand as well as like, hey, what could be the exposure we are faced with. So that's a challenge for us, which needs data, and I think we can do absolutely better as an industry to ask for the same data probably, and not for different ones. I think whether that's on ESG in terms of KPIs, but also on cyber. So I think that's really something we need to work on, need to get better, and I think that's pretty clear. Couple of words to ESG, because I think that's and you mentioned specifically coal exit, but also the oil and gas situation. Obviously, we as an industry, we are committed to influence positively that we are getting carbon neutral, and obviously stop the global warming or limit it to 1.5 degrees. And I think that only goes with pretty drastic views in a certain way. And I think what's important, and you're absolutely right, we need to be fair as a carrier in terms of the transition period. We need to be very transparent and open and early in terms of what we are planning to do. But on the other hand, I think it needs to be understood as well by every client who is very active in that area, that hey, carriers will only be able to support with exposure and with capacity, basically, if there's a real good storyline in terms of how are you shifting, how are you transitioning. And I think there are ways to do that. From our perspective, from an Allianz perspective, we are quite committed to it. We invest a lot of money into the ESG area as well, whether from our own operational perspective, becoming carbon neutral, but also to drive the portfolio in the right way, and making our portfolio carbon neutral at one point and transitioning. But we are clearly here. We want to invest as well into future opportunities, and not only look into what we don't want to do and what we want to restrict, but also it's like, hey, how can we really influence? You mentioned hydrogen and other areas. I think we as a company are known that we have done that in the past, and that we are a leader in renewable energies, which are more traditional now than some others. And we want to grow into these new areas as well. But again, goes to the same topic I mentioned as far as cyber. We need to understand them. We need to make sure it's like, hey, we are a reliable partner in the long run, and we are not jeopardizing our balance sheet and capital, and then can't offer it anymore. So I think it's this fine balance. And I think what's very important to you as well, and I want to conclude with that, is obviously there is this the partnership always on this how and on the what, and I think that's very important. So there are no excuses on the how. I think we need to be transparent. We need to be very early in terms of what we are planning to do, what we want to do, where we want to change. I think that goes without saying, and I think there were a lot of critics probably the last 2 years as well, and that how we did that, and I think carriers shouldn't find excuses for that. We need to do that in the right way. On the what, nevertheless, I think it's a together. This transitioning can only work together, and we need to find the
well,
right
can I press you on that? Because I'm listening to it, I come from the outside. So it seems to me all talking about partnership and support and being together and so forth. But can I push you? We had a few examples. Xavier talked about actual partnerships in terms of climate. But what does it actually mean? Can you give us concrete examples of the kind of working together and partnerships that you're talking about? Actually, concrete examples from either side. What actually works? What kind of support do you need? What kind of partnerships work? Because you get the sense you do want to work together, obviously, but I haven't quite understood what makes a good partnership.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come with an example. And I think we talk about cyber as it's, of course, the risk is unique in its way, its complexity, but in the end, it's about risk management. And we have successfully, through many years on our property damage and business interruption program, had a close collaboration and partnership with our insurer, where they have been sharing risk engineering services, helping us understand what are the exposures, because you have the data. And we don't necessarily have the data or the capabilities to analyze the data you have. And then when you share that with us, we can understand the exposures. You can also come and say, okay, what are the typical improvements, recommendations you can come with to work with the risk? And then we're happy to work with it, because as Laurent said, we're all facing leadership in our companies where resilience is on top of the agenda. And I think if we could learn from the property, for example, and put some of that excellent skill set and approach to things over to the cyber, instead of focusing so much on the underwriting process, instead of then bring the focus over to work on the risk, then we could actually also address the exposure, and we could reduce the overall need for capacity, so that the market and the demand, supply demand, could meet each other. So I think that's an example of where it actually works, the partnership.
Mario, Laurence, would you like to add something
Yes,
about concrete examples of what you think could work?
have two good examples here. The first one is, for example, when we talk about data sharing, in cyber, the capacity is being reduced a lot. We used to have one insurer starting with one questionnaire, and the other ones follow that. Now we have a lot of insurers, each one with their own questionnaire. We fill up all the questionnaires. That is very hard to do. And we don't receive any feedback from insurers. We need to understand why, if I answer yes or no, what is going to happen, because that is going to give us an opportunity to put a measure in how to deal with the risk, on how to bring value to our companies in terms of that. And the other example is in terms of the long-term agreement. If you want to follow a company in the transition period, let's sit down and talk about a 3 or 5 years period. We're not talking now in this current market about prices anymore. We are talking about capacity. We can sit down, understand the risk, and say, okay, we're going to go together 5 years in those new projects. Some of them must be the same in terms of in the oil and gas industry, because we need to store biofuels. That is going to be the vector of this change. And let's bring some compromise from your part, from your side, of saying, okay, we are going to work in giving you a feedback of the questionnaires, and also starting with LTAs for 3 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So feedback and long time. I just want to give Lance a word, then I'll let you come back on these suggestions. I'm interested in concrete example of what these partnerships actually mean, why they don't work, and what you expect from them. So talk to the insurers.
Yes, so the wording, for instance, we need to, I mean, we speak about having new products and etc., and absolutely, why not? But we have quite a few products now, or insurance coverage, where we realize that they need to be adapted to the new situation and situations, and the wording needs to be adapted and maybe based on our risk, on residual risks, and not those which are, we need to be more and more customized, less and less off the shelves wordings, and that's partnership. It's you will really cover the risk based on residual risk on after all the prevention that we are putting in place. So this is where I see the partnership.
So a very concrete example of actual wordings on exclusions, pandemics and so forth. Would you like to answer these challenges to setting up actual concrete partnerships?
Already started.
Yeah, so maybe it's like there are 3 topics you mentioned, so maybe three answers to it as well. So maybe I'll start with the data topic, in terms of that we need to become better, and also like, hey, what you refer to, getting feedback as well on that, and understanding really what makes a risk better or not. And I think I'm surprised to hear that, because we clearly share as well. It's like, hey, we've got a risk report, how we categorize risk and give that feedback clearly. Also, it's like where we see gaps and where we would see or need an improvement on the exposure landscape, on the data, on how you deal with with the cyber situation to really give coverage. So we give this feedback. We also have extensive data now as we see claims lifting up. We obviously have this data as well. And we are putting them into a report. We published it, and these are two examples where we can clearly say as well, we share that. Could it be better? Absolutely. I think this is evolving. You mentioned also the LTA. I want to briefly comment on that one as well. I think as we know that cyber is such an evolving risk, and look back the last 5 years and see how the exposure changed, I think having an LTA is probably exactly the opposite of what probably would be the better suggestion. The better suggestion would be, from my perspective, to say, in the end, it would be probably good as well to be very fluid with the capacity as well. Have this very open dialogue in terms of how the exposure develops, where we see risks, share this information as well amongst the client base, but also be able as a carrier to limit the risk if needed or give more capacity if we see an opportunity. But LTA for fixed limits and fixed wordings, I think, is pretty much a risk in that very evolving risk situation.
If I may link to what Henning said, let's start again with the definition of partnership. Yeah, and you said, Mario, that you're thinking about LTAs. Yeah, also thinking about what Henning said. That's, you know, I'm not thinking in contract periods when I think about partnership. Yeah, it's not if we have a 1-year contract, then it's a 1-year partnership. When we have a 3 years LTA, that we then have a 3 years partnership. You know, when a real partnership needs a good foundation to understand the situation of, let's say, first of all, starting with your risk situation and the changing environment you're in and your changing risk situation, to understand what your demand is, maybe what your necessities are from the company's perspective, from the outside perspective, and so on. For us, it's pretty much the same. We also try to explain what our demands are if we want to make some of the risks insurable. And this is something which cannot build in a day, in a meeting, or even not in a year, or not in a 3 years LTA. So actually, this year, for example, we are celebrating 100 years a partnership with one of our clients. We're insuring this one for 100 years. So actually, this should be a period, maybe even after 3 or 4 years, when we really understand what your demands are and also what your future demands are. And all the other things, I would guess, are then based on that. You have to find the right capacity to make the right risk assessment, because risk assessment is not a one-time shot. It's a continuous discussion and conversation about risk, because risks are not stable. They are changing, what we just said. Yeah. And then finally, also what you said was the wordings. Yeah. We want to understand what your risks are, and then we make handmade and tailor-made wordings. Sometimes we won't come to an agreement with a clause because it's maybe too expensive to edit, or it's not insurable, or whatever. But we try to do that really on a very individual basis. We are here in the corporate segment, and not in a segment where we pull out the drawer and that's the wording and that's it. So that surprised me a bit. It should be our daily work to find individual solutions for all of the companies here, right?
I'm looking at Susie. She looks a little bit skeptical.
No, I was actually thinking that we have also experienced long-term partnerships with insurers, and I think you're speaking to exactly that we shouldn't be limited by the insurance period. That shouldn't define the relationship. It should be us sharing risk information, and we do want to share because we're selling our risk. You're taking it on our behalf. So, of course, we want to share information and have that long-term relationship. And we have also worked with insurers on our liability program for many years, and they understand our risk. And we have discussions around the risk in a detail that is really contributive to the collaboration, and it ensures that we have insurance. Make sure that we have insurance. So I can definitely recognize those. And I was just thinking at the same time that we were maybe missing a partner up here, because where's our broker? We have, as clients, I think many clients have for many years wanted to have a direct contact with the insurers, but we are dealing via brokers, and they are also part of the solution of transitioning together. So
maybe we didn't have enough chairs to invite the brokers to, but it's difficult on the stage. Xavier, do you want to add something?
Yes, sure. So thank you very much. Well, partnerships mean that we understand each other. It's both ways. And you've mentioned it, by the way, it's extremely important to make sure that the insurance industry is solid, that we don't expose our balance sheet to any sort of risk blindly, because this does not work. So I think that the risk and the insurance and the data sharing is equally important for you and for the insurers. It's our interest. It's in our interest to make sure that we exchange more. And it's in our interest that the data is more fluid. That's very important. In AXA XL, I think that we have an average of 6 products per client. So what we want is really this partnership, to understand our customers, because it's by really understanding our customers that we can project ourselves, that we can work together, and that we can project in a long period of time. Again, you don't do that if you just insure one line of business. We do it because we insure several lines of business, and we tend to lead in many lines of business because this is a way to really understand your activity. Are we giving enough data back? Well, we believe we do, but we can probably do better. We've launched this recent initiative with AXA Climate, which is called now Altitude, where we share all the information that exists, that we have collected with our insurance portfolio, but also beyond our insurance portfolio, on what we see in terms of the evolution of the risk mapping in terms of physical risk for the future. And we give it for free. We give it, it's accessible, it's on website. We've launched this initiative to make sure that this information is accessible to everybody. Now, there is data that exists, there is data that does not exist. When it comes to cyber, we still are building our data. And you're right, we need to share more, we need to capture more, we need to process it, and we need to share it more. But I also agree that we are basically structuring as much reports as possible, but we still need to gather additional information to be able to help you better and to feed you with what is really relevant. We are doing it in property and casualty, but we have 100 years of experience on those topics with risk consulting, which basically are really partnering with our customers to identify the risk. We are building those capabilities when it comes to cyber, when it comes to energy transition, because those are new risks. And again, we need to build the data so we are able, in fact, to structure it and to give it back. This is precisely, again, what we are doing. The best example I think that we have is really about this Altitude initiative that we have taken with regard to climate risk, which is, again, accessible to anybody in order to make sure that everyone can project the risk map for the future. And I think that we are able to project, in fact, some data up to flood by up to 30 meters impact in 2050. So will that prove to be right or wrong? I don't know. But what is clear is that all the information that we are having on those topics, we share it. But we share it because we know it's relevant. We share it because we know that it's making sense. We share it because we know that it will bring an added value to you. And this is what we need to pay attention to, making sure that we are really bringing added value on the long term to our customers. So again, here, for me, long-term partnership, it's not necessarily about LTA. Obviously, we can have LTA. That's not a problem. But it's about the state of mind. How do we understand and how deep do we understand the activity of our customers? How committed are we in the future? And basically, what is our track record on those topics? But ultimately, I can hear the topic that you were saying, Laurence, about some of the questions that some of the executives could ask themselves about, well, is insurance needed and is insurance a solution for the future? I believe insurance remains a solution for the future, but we need to make sure that basically we collectively better know the risk. And what we have seen in the last few years is an emergence of the captives, more cession to the captives, clearly the emergence and the structuring of the risk management professional families, specifically in Europe. And I think that we are reaching, in fact, a level of maturity which is extremely strong in Europe. From you, clients, with the risk management capabilities that you are deploying. And then we need to deploy the full set of suites of products and services that can help you. From captive, setting up a captive, helping you to set up a captive, whether it is for property, casualty, or for special risk like cyber, towards the risk transfer, but also the risk consulting, the parametric insurance. So our job today is really to make sure that we provide you with the full perspective of the tools that can be available for you. Risk manager professional family, which is in fact extremely mature in most of the cases in the assessment of your own risk. And this is what we are trying to do. And this is why we are investing significantly from captives, servicing captives towards risk transfer, from risk consulting to parametric solutions, and giving back data, because it's our interest to make sure that basically we are aligned on the vision of your risk.
Captives, do you want to say a word on that? We haven't touched on that too much. We've got 1 minute left. Laurence.
Yeah, I can confirm that this is really the strategy now, especially there are a few very mature captives in Europe and maybe otherwise as well, but we're in FERMA here. What happens is that we can see in our organization that traditional insurance, P&C, etc., we have no risk appetite. We have hardly any risk appetite and very little risk appetite in the captives. All this is changing, so we are really increasing the amount that we are keeping in the captive, but also we try to have these emerging risks and to better understand the risk, and also to show you, speak about the partnership, that we are willing to take part of the risk and to understand it better. So we really need your support as well to make sure that you will be behind the captives and see the evolution. But indeed, the risk appetite in the captive is changing very, very much.
Right, we could talk about this for ages. We've come to the end. I'm afraid of a allotted time, but you've finished exactly on time. So please, a big round of applause for our insurance and for the risk managers. Thank you. You can now go and take your seats again. We could have talked about so much more, but thank you very much for confronting your experiences and actually giving us some very concrete examples of partnerships and what that means. They're all shaking hands together. It's a very good sign. Thank you very much indeed. Once again, a big round of applause for our insurers and risk managers.